Good morning, everyone. For teleSUR, I'm Cody Weddle in Caracas, Venezuela. The civil society forums as part of the Summit of the Americas began Wednesday amid controversy. Some Latin American delegations stormed off in protest. A group of Cuban delegates were denied entry to the forum. The delegations from Cuba and Venezuela then left the forums in protest. Meanwhile, Panamanian social movements condemned the participation of delegations with ties to armed terrorist groups in Miami. Now, despite these issues, in an exclusive interview with teleSUR, Panamanian President Juan Carlos Varela says he expects the conference to overcome conflicts and build unity.
This is the first time that the summit has a papal delegation, with Pope Francis sending a personal delegate. The first summit with the participation of Cuba, that the continent is united, that the wounds of over 50 years are healed, and that unity is sought. The first summit where civil society plays an important role, and the first summit with university presidents. This is what makes things different, and a government committed to having good relations with all the governments from the continent.
Un gobierno comprometido con tener buenas relaciones con todos los gobiernos distintos.
And in Colombia now, tens of thousands of Colombians are expected to march in support of the country's current peace process. The event will also mark the 67th anniversary of the assassination of a renowned politician. And as our correspondent Natalia Margarita reports, his murder is considered by many to be the start of Colombia's long conflict.
On the 9th of April 1948, prominent political leader Jorge Eliezer Gaitan was gunned down. Back then, Victor was just 1 year old, but still vividly remembers and with deep sorrow the love and admiration his father felt for the liberal politician.
Gaitan was an educated man in every single field. My father taught us how his assassination was motivated by envy, because Gaitan wanted a dignified country, a divine country, very different from the one we are currently living in.
Political analysts agree that Colombian history would have developed differently if Gaitan wouldn't have been assassinated.
His death was a turning point in history. I believe that if Gaitan, who was a popular leader for the masses, was still alive, democracy could have been deepened.
Gaitan's death came in a moment in which power was being disputed between two parties, the liberal and the conservative. While conservative Mariano Espina was in power, peasants were denied land rights, workers their labor rights. But Gaitan was that liberal leader always by their side, fighting for better conditions for the poor.
And that led to Gaitan gaining significant importance in the wake of the coming elections. His death meant the thwarting of a whole movement of peasants, workers, and even intellectuals of the time.
Minutes after his assassination, thousands of angry followers took to the streets in what is known in Colombian history as the Bogotazo. Buildings were set on fire, violent clashes with security forces took place, thousands were reported injured and dead. The turmoil rapidly expanded to other regions and rural areas. It was just the beginning of a period of widespread violence.
What in Colombia's history is known as the violence between liberals and conservatives, in reality was a war between the dominant classes against the people of the rural areas.
The truth behind Gaitan's assassination was never clarified. However, the episode is remembered among Colombians as a political crime orchestrated by those who were in power at the time.
His death exposes the way in which Colombian elites and dominant classes prevent, at whatever cost, that an alternative political project can emerge and consolidate itself in this country.
He was an extremely well-prepared man. He came up with great ideas, and that's why for the politicians at the time, he was not seen as a positive way. That's why they assassinated him.
Right here in downtown Bogota, the charismatic leader and politician Jorge Eliezer Gaitan was assassinated in 1948, 67 years ago, on April the 9th, a day that since 2011 has been declared as the National Day for Memory and Solidarity with the victims of more than 5 decades of violence and conflict in Colombia. Natalia Margarita, teleSUR, Bogota.
And in Ecuador now, the government there is working to make home ownership a possibility for all. As our correspondent Liz Sherfius reports, the loaning system will be changed to make buying a home more accessible.
Working to make owning a home accessible for all citizens and stimulate the construction sector, the government of Ecuador has invested $1.1 billion to develop new lines of credit and promote access to housing. These lines of credit can be obtained through the traditional banking system or through the Bank of the Ecuadorian Social Security System, or BS. These credits go up to $70,000 with 5% interest.
I am going to ask for $60,000, and I feel like this is good because it is at 6% interest rate, and this benefits, I think, all the citizens. It is very good, and it is coming from the state. It is perfect.
BS credits, formerly having an 8% interest rate, have now been lowered to 6%, and those of private banks have been lowered from 10% over 15 years to 5% over a 20-year period.
If a family before paid 10% interest on a quota of $675 for a home of $60,000, they were going to pay a total of $162,123. With new regulations, with the plan that we are putting forward, the interest of 4.99%, the monthly quota lowers from $655 to $462. This saves a monthly amount of $213 in the quota that this family would pay to access a home.
The Ministry of Homes is currently revising requirements for families to access loans. Up to this point, 250,000 mortgages have been approved, and plans are underway to build 2,600 more homes.
In the Ministry of Homes, we are going to provide credits up to $6,000, loans of $6,000 for homes up to $25,000. This means that those who have a project that are worth up to $25,000 at this moment of development, because we have, apart from the $95 million that the Minister of Political Economy speaks out, $40 million in credits to incentivize these sectors.
These reforms are possible through cooperation between the public and private sectors, as 8 of the largest banks in the country have committed their support. Owning a home will become a very real possibility for those Ecuadorians who before did not have the means to own a home once the credits are fully functioning in June of this year. Liz Sherfius, TeleSUR, Ecuador.
Venezuela's Vice President Jorge Arreaza continued his tour of the Caribbean with a stop in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. He made the stop to inspect projects built through the PetroCaribe Pact between Venezuela and Caribbean nations. Now, since its creation in 2005, PetroCaribe has financed numerous projects around the region benefiting tens of thousands. Those projects have included refineries and hydroelectric plants. And meanwhile, in what many see as a duel for influence in the region, U.S. President Barack Obama arrived in Jamaica to also meet with Caribbean community leaders. Obama seeks to persuade Caribbean countries to move away from their ties with Venezuela and PetroCaribe. The U.S. launched the Caribbean Security Energy Initiative last year, and in January, U.S. Vice President Joe Biden hosted Caribbean leaders in Washington. At the meeting, Biden reportedly told some leaders that the Venezuelan government would fall. Some Caribbean leaders are reportedly skeptical of Washington's sincerity in re-engaging with the region. Now, Obama's trip to Jamaica marks the first visit by a U.S. president there since 1982. And in Canada now, in Montreal, Quebec, hundreds of students occupied a building in one of the city's main universities Wednesday. They were protesting against rising tuition fees and austerity measures. Police quickly surrounded the building and later arrested 22 students. Many of them now face charges for illegal assembly. Iranian leaders have offered their thoughts on the unfolding situation in Yemen. The Iranians say that the airstrikes there should stop in favor of a diplomatic solution. In a visit to Pakistan, Iran's Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif said that it is necessary to find an integral diplomatic solution to the conflict. So far, the fighting in Yemen has left more than 550 dead and over 100,000 displaced. On Thursday, Iranian President Hassan Rouhani reiterated calls for an end to airstrikes by Saudi Arabia and its allies. On his first visit to Moscow to discuss economic cooperation, Greek Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras warned about a new Cold War-type relationship between Russia and Western nations. In a joint press conference with Russian President Vladimir Putin, Tsipras said Greece opposes the sanctions imposed by the European Union. Now that's despite prior warnings from EU heads about opposing the sanctions. And back to Colombia we go, where one of soccer's biggest names will head up a match in support of peace in the country. Argentine soccer legend Diego Armando Maradona arrived in the capital of Bogota ahead of what's being called the Soccer Match for Peace. The match will also feature famed Colombian players René Higuita and Carlos Valderrama. The game is part of the World Summit on Arts and Culture for Peace. The event supports the peace negotiations taking place in Havana between the Colombian government and FARC rebels. That's what we're covering on this Thursday morning. We have plenty more on those stories and others at our website, telesurtv.net/English. Back with you in just a few hours. For now, for TeleSUR English, I'm Cody Weddle. Have a great day.